let's spend 5 minutes. Can you just give me a brief intro, each of you? Because I read only your current positions. For some reason, the school didn't send me the CVs, so I wasn't able to see your profile. So if you just maybe the 1-minute intro for each of you would be great, so we meet each other.
Yeah, I'm an IT guy, and I've been working with data for a long time, since a year now. I'm a PM, team lead in a software company.
Which one?
It's called Gaming Tech. It's a small one.
Okay.
And
is it a product or an outsource?
It's a product. And this is pretty much it about my professional life.
Okay.
Sort of thing.
Thanks. Sergey?
I'm a lawyer. I work at a law firm and doing mostly corporate and dispute resolution.
Okay.
And I've been a lawyer like all my professional life. So.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm finance manager at a Norwegian company, which is building now solar plants.
Oh, really?
Ukraine, yeah.
Which one?
Scotland Solar.
So it's a producer or?
We have full cycle from
Okay.
Acquisition some local companies, and after that we have a cycle of construction and operating the plants.
You're not producing the panels though, right?
No, we don't produce.
You procure them from China, probably.
Yes. Probably yes. We construct the plants and operate them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a hot topic right now. Okay.
Yeah.
I work here at Kyiv School of Economics, and I've been here for almost 4 years. But I'm mostly dealing with policy projects, which is like supporting reforms in Ukraine. It's about bringing European politicians and professors here, so that they share experience. They also teach for students here. But my background is in journalism, and before I joined the school, I worked at Kyiv Post, in newspaper, 5 years.
So you worked with Brian very closely.
With Brian.
Cool. Awesome. Okay. I know Igor's background.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm in IT last 15 years. I have been working in engineering, delivery, and building the organization from scratch. I have the extension experience to building IT organization from scratch. I built a delivery center for one of the IT companies. And now I'm working on the edge between the operational and delivery for the Oracle. I'm in charge of one of the Oracle offices in Ukraine.
My name is Mikola. I'm from sales background, working for pharmaceutical company.
Which one?
In particular, Yuria Pharm, this is Ukrainian one. I'm commercial director of the aesthetic medicine department.
Okay.
So basically we are producing injections for lips enhancement, for facial contouring.
Okay.
So basically we are making women much confident in themselves. So by this we are multiplying the happiness in the women's society.
Nice sales pitch, I like it.
So we are selling to 40 countries.
Okay.
My name is Andrei Banko. Currently, I'm officially and deputy general manager of Kyiv workshop of software Kyiv company. It's software outsources, originally specialized on porting Windows software to Macintosh. Currently, we are not for outsources. We have some titles, but our model, our order is to buy titles which some company already developed, but decided to drop. And he has ideas to continue and to raise this product that were eliminated by the previous owners, and currently our main title is Family Tree Maker, which was dropped by Ancestry 3 years ago, and we picked it up, and this cooperation with Ancestry continues. And we have other departments
To be honest, I need to pick up my squash game. I used to play it extensively in Moscow. I stopped playing it when I moved to Kiev back in 2016. I need to get back in shape. Yeah. So yes, I'm definitely glad to get a squash partner here.
But you're not visiting that club,
no? Okay.
Yeah, I need to answer all this.
No. Just 1 minute. Just 1 minute intro on yourself.
Okay.
What are you doing?
Yeah. So, as all of my group already know about me, yes, I'm working as marketing manager, usually at IT companies. Usually, they are IT outsourcing companies like Cyclone, like Luxoft, but smaller ones. Yes, currently I work at Techno-Relay company, which is also like form dedicated team, fixed projects for external companies, for external clients, customers. I have also experience in marketing in like B2C companies like ZWA, which is probably like trying to compete with Uber Eats, something that's maybe familiar to you. Yes, in Ukraine, and well, but IT projects, IT industry for me is much more closer for those companies who work for, who export Ukrainian products, services related to IT industry for external customers. This is my,
Okay, thanks. Cool. What I thought would be useful for us again to kind of set the tone for the course. And obviously I'm not going to be able to send this one to you. But I thought I'd share and go through you with the city, or it's called Kyiv City. In a nutshell, it's a kind of Ukraine launch plan that I did for for Uber. Because I mean, well, first of all, because it worked. Second, because I think it will be a very insightful illustration into again the approaches, concepts that we're going to be looking at later on in the course. So the kind of how this presentation appeared back in 2015 when I was still in Moscow doing working on another startup. I was kind of in contact with Uber because some of my classmates from INSEAD, they went to work for Uber after graduating. I think 5 or 6 of my classmates were country managers for Uber in different countries, for UAE, for Singapore, for Morocco, South Korea, Japan, Latin America. And then a buddy of mine who was the general manager for Uber in the United Arab Emirates, he called me in 2013, the kind of fall of 2013. I was working in a management consulting executive search company in Moscow, and he said, look, Uber is looking for someone to help them to acquire talent for Eastern Europe. You're doing something like that, maybe kind of you'd like to talk to the organization and join us. So I spent some time, I talked to the head of recruitment for EMEA region, and kind of he started with, with joining the recruitment team. I said, look, I'm not really it's not exactly my piece of cake. I'd like to get back into the operational business. And he said, do you think about launching Ukraine? So what would you say about moving back to Kyiv and launching Uber? And I said, that's definitely interesting. That conversation took place in December 2013. I received the first stage of kind of Uber recruitment process is people receive a 2-hour analytics test. It's an online test you get a link, and kind of there are like 40 questions that you have to answer on various analytical aspects of Uber, Uber functioning. I received that test, and then kind of I took it, I passed it, and he said, "Then look, we're putting it on hold because obviously, things happened in Ukraine, and Uber pulled out." And I got back in touch with them in May of 2015. I said, "Look, let's talk about Ukraine. Let's get back to Ukraine because." To the conversation on Ukraine, because well, first kind of the conflict is more or less at least localized in the east, so there is kind of a little threat that it's going to spread, spread further. Second, the 3G is finally in Ukraine, because early in 2015, that's when they gave out the licenses for 3G finally, and 3G is a big technological enabler, obviously, for Uber. Third, the economy is in bad shape, which is good for Uber again, because lots of people, there's going to be a fair share of supply, so a lot of people will be willing to drive for money. And so again, we got back into that conversation, interviews, talking, on Zoom to various people from around the world, and kind of marketing assignment, which is a fun thing. So Uber basically, and I like that approach. The way they approach hiring people is very pragmatic. So, well, first they give you analytics tests to kind of to understand that you can work with numbers, that you can kind of analyze complex issues. And they're not that complex, but it's just kind of to see that you can deal with numbers, because Uber is obsessed with numbers. It's a very data-driven company. If you pass that, then interviews. For general manager, then you have to do a marketing test, which is basically the kind of the other side, which is a very soft, very creative test. On the marketing test, you have to do assignments like answer 10 tweets, various, negative, positive, etc. Write, create 2 or 3 campaigns for Uber in your city. Do some other things, so like answer a few angry or unhappy customer emails, things like that. You pass that, and then kind of the last big thing is basically they ask you, okay, so give us the city presentation. In a nutshell, it's a kind of give us the launch strategy for Uber in the country, for Uber in the market. When they called me, it was late August. I was at the sea with my family, and that's when the vacation ended, basically. So I spent a week on this. On average, I had about 4 hours of sleep per day. Again, I was not in Kiev, but I had to manage a few things remotely to get data. But in the end, again, as I said, it worked out pretty well. So let me show you the logic of what the key elements of how I looked, and then I learned that Uber basically looked the same way at approaching launching a new market, or it's not necessarily about launching a new market, it's also about just analyzing a market and thinking about market in terms of key approaches, key tools, and key elements. So yeah, that's the agenda part. I had to present it to 2 people. One was basically my future boss, and the other one was the guy who basically headed half of the world for Uber, who was heading Uber's business in Europe, Middle East, Asia, Africa. So everything apart from South and North America. And it was about an hour's time presentation. So I gave them just a brief overview of what Ukraine is, because obviously most, except for the city launcher, most of those people have never been to Ukraine. So I needed to sell them. it's a sales pitch, obviously. I mean, like any presentation has to be a sales pitch. So I had to sell them the market, I had to sell them Ukraine, why it's good, to be in the market. And describe some of the key things, like in the territory, some of the economics things, agriculture, IT, and why Kyiv is of particular interest. So the thing that I did next, obviously, was a high-level overview. So what is the market like in general, economically? What are the key premises? Why does it make sense at all for Uber to look at the market like Kyiv? I started with, obviously, again, there is this tool called Pastel. I don't know how many of you heard about it. Sorry?
Oh,
Okay.
Yes.
So in probably macroeconomics, you learned it. That's kind of, even though it sounds kind of theoretical, it has very practical kind of approach. It helps you to shape your thinking in doing the top-level overview of the market into some of the key elements. So you have to think in terms of all of those factors. Because these are important factors, especially if you think about new market. So my point was basically to give them some of the key factors, some of the key elements that will influence the success. And I also thought it would be good, to compare them to some of the markets that they're already present at, so that they kind of get the idea. Is it little? Is it a lot? So how does it compare to some of the regional markets? So I said, look, Kyiv is decent in population. Moscow is obviously bigger, but it's larger than Bucharest and Warsaw. It has good density. Not as dense in some of those cities, but still pretty decent population density. Population density obviously is important because it means that the operational efficiency of rides can be increased. So there are more people kind of living closer together. Because if you have a very spread out city, like an American, like typical American cities, which are very spread out, it means the trip efficiency is definitely going to be lower, because drivers will spend a lot of time, getting to the next passenger, right? So the higher the density, the better it is for guys like Uber. Average monthly income, again, not a high figure, but I told them that it's a high share of shadow economy, which is true. Obviously, car ownership, good, It's important to know whether the market has enough cars, right? Has enough supply that can work for Uber. Mobile internet penetration, obviously very important. Again, because that's how Uber operates, through the mobile app. And I showed them that in fact mobile internet penetration is absolutely on par with the regional guys. Smartphone penetration, same thing. So pretty high smartphone penetration, again, which is good for guys like Uber. Credit and debit card penetration, also good, solid, high number, definitely on par with the other markets. So the box tick here. That's the demand side. On the supply side, and I'm going to deep dive into that. So there are about 20,000 taxis in Kyiv. The average fare is about $3, which is definitely lower than the other markets. And the taxi fare to income ratio is a little bit higher than on the other markets, but again not hugely higher. Meaning that people do want to spend money on taxis, but at the same time, this is good because it means if people pay more of their kind of share of wallet for taxi, that means there is some potential for Uber kind of to get into the market and to decrease the fares a little bit, right? So again, a good thing. And obviously it's important to highlight the substitutes because the better the public transportation in the city is, the worse it is for Uber or for any other competitor, because people, if it's a good metro system, people use it because it's cheaper. So then I looked at the market more extensively. I deep dived right straight into the market where Uber will be tapping. And this was a very interesting case for me, because there were literally no studies of the market, of the taxi market. So I spent a lot of time doing my desktop research, and I found fragmented bits and pieces of information. How big is the market? How many cars? How many companies? Etc. 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 And I had to do my own field research, and I'm going to tell you about it in a little bit. But basically, yes, my market estimate was pretty accurate, as it happened. Was that the Kyiv taxi market at that time was about 1 billion hryvnia per year, about 700,000 bookings per week. Uber measures per week, so I put it on a per week basis. I said, yeah, again, 20,000 cars, and most of them are unlicensed cars, which is good. Again, I highlighted it because it was important for Uber, because the more regulated the market is, the more difficult it is for guys, again, like Uber to operate. So they like the unlicensed markets. Taxi companies, I showed that it's a fragmented market, meaning there are no dominant players, that there were a lot of small companies, either owners of taxis or dispatchers, and again, which is good, right? Because if it's a fragmented market, it means that there is no one single big competitor that you have, deep pockets that you have to fight on. Yeah, some commercial stuff like how much commission they make for, from the taxi. The regulations, it was important to highlight there are no, they do exist, but no major restrictions that Uber faces in some other markets, like pricing and car types. Because in some markets, for example, in the States, a taxi can be only yellow, right? So, and if you operate as a taxi under a taxi license, you can only have a yellow car. It's a restriction, right? It restricts your supply, because not too many yellow cars in Kyiv. No such restriction here again, which is important because it means that you can have, good top of the funnel. You can basically get anyone who is willing to drive on board. Another big issue, obviously, is the license, and I highlighted that the license is needed. So there is a licensing of, of rights, but it's poorly regulated. So again, which is good. On payments, I highlighted that it's a cash-dominated market, and later on, again, I'll deep dive why that was a very good factor and why that is important. Because if you put, if you connect the dots, so you have a high car penetration, but it's a it's a cash-dominated market. That means that the supply is not there to provide for the for the car penetration, which is excellent because Uber operated basically mostly on cards. Tariffs, it was important to highlight for me that tariffs are very complicated, that people don't understand how much are they going to pay. So even for some of the apps, if you look at the app, which existed at that time, Uklon, doesn't matter. It was very difficult to calculate the fare because if you have a child seat, that's extra. If you have, different types of cars, if it's air conditioning, it's extra. If it's, heating, it's extra. Everything is extra. So the tariff formation was pretty complicated.
Where did you take all this information?
Where? It was both. It was both. It was desktop research and field research. So the way I approached field research.
Industry espionage.
This 300 firms and the information about them, because as far as I understand, these firms are basically some people organized like some app and a couple of guys sitting in the room and just jockeying different drivers. So how is it possible to actually gather information and send you information about?
Driver and many of them will share with you such information.
This is exactly where theory meets reality. As that's a good question. It's a good question. Are you familiar with management consulting firms like McKinsey, Bain, BCG? That's like the big three. Also, obviously, the others have their management consulting arms as well. So, like Deloitte has, Pricewaterhouse has, etc. But like the big three, because I have lots of friends, obviously, from INSEAD working in some of those firms. This is this is exactly how you approach either strategic issues in general or some operational issues in particular. When you interview for a management consulting firm, because it's a pretty complicated they have a pretty rigorous interviewing and selection process, so it's pretty hard to get into that firm. Usually what happens, they give you a case. For analysts, so for like young entry-level position, they will give you a very simple question, such as how many tennis balls can you fit into Boeing 737? Their point is they don't want to have the exact answer because no one in the parking world knows the exact answer. No one ever did that. No one ever tried to fit the tennis balls into Boeing 737. What they want you to do is to see how you think. So they want to see and hear, because what you have to do, it's an interview process. They tell you the question, you take a minute or two, and you spit out the solution. So you walk them through the logic. So they want to make sure you can split the problem and you can understand the logic of approaching the problem, even though you have no idea, neither of the exact dimensions of Boeing 737, nor of many other things. So how would you approach, that problem?
I would say that I would fit one ball.
Okay.
Because the question was, how many can you fit? I can fit one ball.
Okay, so fair enough. Okay, they will clarify the question. What's the maximum number of balls that you can fit in Boeing 737?
That you could fit.
It depends on considering that into a body. Okay, well, let me clarify for a data analyst. Okay.
For a lawyer.
As a lawyer, yeah, exactly. No. For you, I will write down separate sheet with lots of bullet reps and warranties. No, but okay, like in a body, in an empty shell of a 737.
I've just read
The maximum.
one
As
article
many-
about
as many as possible.
how consultants think and how they interviewed. So I have some.
How to move the Fuji? Is that the book?
No, I don't remember. Just that they make assumption. They try to let's think that Boeing 747 is diameter about 10 meters, 5 meters. Bow is something like
Exactly. So
7 centimeters, and you can calculate one layer of this balls and then length and multiple and get some figures plus minus.
yeah, exactly. It's an educated guess based on common sense, based on logic. That's one way you can approach it. The other way you can approach it, that's what I would do.
You know what I did when I read some article about protest in Donetsk, or about some people who try to went out to streets against something, and there were 500,000 people and some pictures.
So you do the math.
And I can try to calculate heads and make assumption how many rows in that head, multiple, and get not half million, about 10,000.
Exactly. Yes.
And then I noticed that when some fake news tried to fake a number of people, they started picturing from some low level, and you cannot understand what square is covered with people.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's always good to use, common sense whenever you hear the, that type of information. But yeah, I mean, it's an educated guess. So the whole point is, the other way to approach this, that's kind of the way I did it, because when you're at INSEAD, and when you're closer to the graduation, at schools like INSEAD, HBS, Wharton, there are basically three directions you can go. People go to big three consulting firms, and because they come on campus, they wine and dine you. So like McKinsey comes on INSEAD campus, they literally invite everyone for dinner, like their partners from all over the world come, they talk to you because they really want to hire INSEAD graduates. There are tons of them at McKinsey. So consulting, investment banking, or industry. I went for consulting. I got an offer from McKinsey, but I chose another company which I went to work for. But the question, I mean, the way I answered it was different, but along the same lines. I mean, you can just simply calculate. I mean, 737 sits about 150 passengers on average. There is like the area between the seats can fit 1.5 persons. So then you multiply, you add the empty space underneath for the luggage, the cabin. You measure approximately how many balls will fit into an average human body, and then you multiply it by that. So, but again, so answering back to your question, it's desktop research with some assumptions, but also it was a field research because I wanted to check my assumptions, because it's always good, that's what consultants do as well. A friend of mine, she's a bit older than me, she worked for Babe in Moscow, when Babe just launched in the 90s, and one of their assignments was for a tobacco company. Their client was BAT, and I think they were doing some research. Literally, what they were doing, paid consultants, they went out every day for a few days and did the metrics in each of those little spots where the cigarettes are sold. That's because you have to physically do it. You have to validate your assumptions. If you can do that, you should do that.
Nice job.
Sorry?
Nice job.
So that's the way I did it. The way I did it, again, as I said, I was not in Kiev. I was far away. So what I did, on the supply side, so on taxi side, I hired 2 students. I paid them, I think it was 500 hryvnia a day. So what they did was just taking trips. I gave them specific, I created a 10 question, I think it was 10 question questionnaire. I validated it. I had a friend who worked for GfK, which is one of the big firms that do social, all types of market research. So I asked her to look at it, validate how the questions are shaped, etc. She helped me with it. I gave them this questionnaire, so they were doing rides. Every day, different rides. So they were calling taxis, they were getting taxis on the streets, they were getting taxis on the stops, and they had to, with every driver that they were with, they had to ask those 10 questions. And they were both qualitative and quantitative questions. So there were questions like, how many trips on average do you do per day? How many hours do you work? What's the average, trip fare that you get? What's the mile? What's the gasoline consumption for your car? What type of, fuel you have? Because in Ukraine, it's important to understand that, a lot of taxi guys have gas, right? Not gasoline. And things like that. It was funny that the field research validated my desktop research to the dollar, basically. So my assumption, I was proud of myself. Obviously, it was I'll show you the figures later on. But yeah, most of the figures were completely validated. But yeah, that's the way it is. I mean, it's like there is no other way. You have to physically do it. You have to be very hands-on. And that's exactly kind of the way I did it when I was running Uber. So,
Excuse me, about students, you like hired them remotely through like Robota UA?
no, through some friends. You know, I just I reached out to my friends on Facebook. Said, look, who wants to make? You know, maybe you have like kids who want to make some bucks for a couple of days doing rides. You know, just kind of riding on taxis.
But yeah, you have to have kind of reliable people, because once
Absolutely,
I was
yeah.
riding on
That they don't cheat, that they don't kind of say, absolutely, of course.
I was riding on Električka like 1 year ago, and there was this girl doing this like research for some tobacco company, like dressed in blue, and he was like, she was filling out the whole way.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a very big issue for this type of research. It's one of the big factors. It's very important to have a reliable supplier, because otherwise the data can be skewed tremendously. Absolutely. Yes.
Yes. Why?
Yes.
Why? You said that Uber is interested in the gray markets where all of you go.
Yeah.
But during the launch, you had the requirement for drivers or the companies to have a license.
Yeah. You were at our launch or what? Or you know it? How do you know it?
Yeah, I know because I was talking to drivers.
Okay.
I was one of the early adopters, so to say.
Cool.
And I was asking drivers, and sometimes I happen to have people who were like kind of involved in the policy making, driving me. I mean, there was a guy, I think, like on Mazda, quite an expensive car, a new expensive car, and he said that I'm directly involved in building in Uber policies, and I asked him some questions. Well, I didn't ask him why, because but he was asking me a lot of questions of how do I like this and other stuff. And yes, so sometimes you're lucky to find some driver who is aware of some stuff. But my question is really why you have this license, because then you have locked the drivers to the partners, and still there was a lack of control, because the partners said, oh, okay, I have a license, but then they just had these agreements with drivers which didn't go through the technical control and all the other stuff.
Okay, to answer your question very simply, Uber is an open platform. So an ideal situation for Uber is no restrictions whatsoever. Right? Because the easier it is to join, the better the adoption is. That's what you're going to hear from any marketing person. The fewer barriers to entry, the better the adoption. Now, when we were about to launch, and to make a long story short, I joined Uber December 1st, 2015. On December 3rd, I was in Moscow at that time, and I actually started working with them in October, but I spent another month negotiating with them my contract terms, because I was a greedy bastard and I wanted to get as many shares as possible. So we're finalizing while I was already involved. But my official joining date was December 1st. On December 3rd, I had to fly into Kyiv because we had meetings organized. So the meeting was with Abramovich, who was at that time the Minister of Economy. The meeting was with the Deputy of Klitschko for Transportation for Kyiv. The meeting was with Emelian, who was at that time the Deputy Minister of Transportation. And someone else, Amcham, whatever. But yeah, when we met with Emelian, that was the first question. He was like, but you guys are going to be licensed, right? And we're like, of course. I mean, there is no other way. I mean, and I'll tell you, because my launch strategy, that was a big piece. I mean, working with regulator for Ukraine was really one of the big pieces of my of the success of the strategy, why I thought it would be successful, and it worked out that way. But obviously, the closer we were to the launch, because we launched in June of 2016, and I'll tell you why it took us so long. But before the launch, it was totally understandable that there is no way we will be able to get drivers to licenses. Just very simple. I mean, you have 90+% of your supply. I mean, these guys, they are not licensed. If you are the only guy in town who's just like, you know, you're the holier than the Pope. That's what they say, right? So if we come in and say, you know, we're good guys, we're nice guys, we want you to be licensed, and they're like, why? You know, I don't need a license for anyone else. Why would I, you know, bother to get a license just for Uber? First of all, because Uber is unknown. Second, it's unproven for our market. Most people didn't believe it will work out, you know, etc. So for drivers, it was extremely complicated. Even though the license is not that difficult to get, it's still a friction in the funnel. It's still something, it's a step that you have to make. You know, it's like, you know, it's like in supermarket. If the Coke is right in front of your face, you will grab it. If you have to kind of go through, you know, some other, even if you know that there is Coke there, right, you'll probably grab Pepsi, which is right in front of you. That's the same thing with the, you know, with the drivers. So what we did was kind of, when we launched, I said, we are going to be asking for the license, but we give the drivers a 1-month kind of trial period, which was a kind of nice workaround. Then that 1-month trial period extended to 2 months, then it extended to 3 months, then it extended to forever. Because technically, to the government, we said, we're working through partners, and those partners have license. And that was absolutely true. Every one of those partners had license.
So you delegated some, how to say, compliance issues to the partners.
Yeah. Uber has contract with partners. Uber does not deal with individual drivers.
Oh, really?
Of course. Uber, okay, let's put it the other way. Uber deals with what's called driver partner. So in Ukraine, at this point, you can't be an individual driver and deal with Uber if you have a FOB. So if you're a private entrepreneur, then you can be directly, you know, connected. If you're not, like most people are, you have to connect through a connector, we call it. We can talk about it in you know, a little bit later why that system was developed. Again, it was successful, I can tell you. I brought it from Moscow because in Moscow, when I still lived in Moscow, I also launched an Uber partner company in Moscow, and I understood the system, I saw the logic, and I saw why it could be very useful for Uber to very quickly tap into the market, to use someone else's hands to attract the drivers, not, you know, to do it by our own hands, but just kind of to use lots of those connectors who would spend time, money, effort on bringing the drivers to us.
May I ask you
Sure.
about if you are not if the taxi driver is not a POP, how he or she is legally bound agreement with your partners, like
It's
labor or something?
It's none of my business.
You don't know. Okay.
It's none of my business. My business, you know, whenever we had, listen, we spend some money on lawyers. We spend some money on lawyers. We spend some money on GR. Legally, we're fully protected. We have, you don't have an agreement. What you have is a licensing agreement. You know what that is, right? You buy a license. So if you're a partner, you sign a licensing agreement with Uber, which means you get the right to use Uber's software. Uber is a software company. Uber is not a hardware company. Uber is not a people's company. So the only thing that Uber gives you the right to use their software. That's the agreement that you sign.
But then you created the infrastructure for your competitors to come